Hello and welcome to Sam Not So Wise. My name is Sam, and today we have some wonderful guests that I join the bandwagon in starting my own chat video series. And I'm basically copying Mr. Bart up here, as he had the same guests to start his video series. And we're talking about my main guy, Iain M Banks, who, as you regular viewers of the channel know, I think he's quite all right. So we're going to talk about everything sci-fi and maybe fantasy. We'll see, just have a general chat, and then we'll get into some Iain Banks stuff, especially this book that they just introduced, the Algebraist. We will be having a chat, non-spoiler and spoiler discussion at the end, but we'll just have a nice little chat before then. So I'm going to ask my wonderful guests to introduce themselves, because I think it's better to maybe get it from the horse's mouths themselves, as it were. You guys probably know who they are, but I think it's best that we hear from them. So if you could just tell us a little bit about you and your channel to start with. So we'll start with Mr. Bart first.
Hello, everyone. So I'm super excited. First of all, thank you, Sam, for the invite. This feels like a little bit of a deja vu because we did this. How long it's been? It's been a month? Has it been a month? Maybe about a month
since we.
No, but anyway, it doesn't matter. It feels like just yesterday talking to the two of you. It was a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to this immensely. A little bit about myself. I have a channel, Bart's Bookspace. I talk about science fiction a lot, but not just sci-fi. I read maybe 75% last few years of what I read is science fiction, and the remainder, it's a nice mix of, literary stuff, a little bit of fantasy, mystery, some horror. So a nice, well-rounded mix. And yes, we did the buddy read with the second buddy read, actually. This one was the Algebraist, which I have a hard time pronouncing. And it was an awesome read. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. I'm really excited. And Sam, you mentioned that this is like possibly a new series that you're starting. Do you have a name for this series?
I'm going to call it Wisecracks.
Oh, it's perfect.
I love it.
Here we go. Okay, get ready. So I'm not so wise.
Thank you, Bart, for that wonderful introduction. I am going to actually be asking you a little bit about other genres, because I don't know if you guys know, these guys are kind of primarily sci-fi presenting on their channel, but I know that they read a little bit outside, so I just want to pick their brains a little bit. So let's go, Whitney. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah. So I have the channel Secret Sauce of Storycraft, and I have become almost exclusively science fiction on my channel, and I don't know, come check it out. It's a good time.
Oh, I definitely recommend both of these channels. Obviously, they're quite different in the way they present themselves, but both equally brilliant. So I definitely recommend you go and check them out, like and subscribe, all of their stuff, please. But I'm going to start us off with some general chat, and I'm going to go as obvious as you could possibly go in a chat. What are you reading now? This time we'll go ladies first. Whitney, what are you reading right now?
Okay, I have two books I'm reading right now. I'm reading a book called The Rig by Roger Levy. It is also a big chunker like this one, and I'm having a really good time with it. The cover is deceiving, so that's what I can say about that. Really enjoying it so far. And I also I'm reading the Hanu Regimi, I might be saying that his name wrong, The Quantum Thief.
Ooh. How do you like it? How do you like The Quantum Thief?
I am actually loving it so far. It's really a fun time. It's a really good read. It's so fast-paced.
I've heard of it, but I've literally no idea what it's about. I haven't even heard of the other one. So, but I know you read a lot, right, Whitney? You read kind of like
I read a lot, yeah.
Over 100 books a year or something mad.
180.
Like
Sam,
that was right. Yeah.
I've read about 23 books this year. So.
Wow. Okay.
Amazing.
What are you reading, Bart?
So I'm also reading two books, and actually you could say three. because I'm listening to one. I don't know. I've started listening. I got an Audible subscription recently. I'm trying to learn how to listen to books because it never worked for me. I'm still not good at it. I still feel like I realize 5 minutes later that I have no clue what I just read. And then it's more difficult to kind of like go back when you're listening to something. I don't know if you have the same experience. If I'm reading, if I noticed that I just missed the name or who, I can just glance back at the page. With the Audible, I have to like go back 30 seconds just to hear the name. Who is that? It's a little bit frustrating for me as I have a hard time concentrating. So let's start with the one I'm listening to. It's the first book by Joe Abercrombie. So it's actually fantasy. I wanted to try the First Law book. So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. And the voice of the narrator is amazing. He's so good. So I'm really enjoying.
This is what everybody says, that the narrator for the First Law is like exceptional.
He is Logan Nine Fingers to me. The narrator.
Yeah. Look, I mean, he's great, but also Glokta. I mean, that is just incredible. Like, I wish this was all Glokta, like that, nothing else. I'm definitely, super concentrated when we have when Glokta is on the page. So yeah, I'm having fun with it. I'm not sure if I'm loving it. It doesn't feel like, but it's fun. It's funny. It's fast paced. The characters are vivid, and the narration is great. And I have heard from Joanna actually that book one is not as good as. But if you like book one, you're gonna love the series later on. So you've read the whole the trilogy, or did you read more?
I read all the trilogy, and then I have been on the waiting list at my library for the second trilogy. Everyone says is better than the first, which I can't. I have a hard time with because I just absolutely adored the characters. I really don't feel like the plot is as strong in that series as it is in other series, but I didn't care because I just wanted to hang out with the characters. I loved it so much.
Yeah, I've read the first trilogy only, and I'm gonna stick my foot in my mouth straight away in this chat by saying that it was all right. Like most people find it to be like one of their favorite series they've ever read, and for me, I was just like, that was okay. And I didn't really have the impetus to go and read further. I own everything else on Kindle, but I need to go back to it. It was quite a few years ago, so maybe I was just a bit too immature in my reading tastes, or how I read things. So I will go back to it one day.
Well, I think it really has to do with what kind of reader you are, Sam, because if you're one of those people who enjoys those characters and just getting to know them, and especially how morally gray every single one of those characters are, like none of them are going to be awesome people. So
it's a funny one because I can't. When I think about what kind of a reader I am, it's a little bit like with my music taste as well. I don't think I am a specific reader. There's a lot of books that I like for what they are presenting. So I like a lot of plot-based books. I like a lot of theme-based books. I like a lot of character-based books. It's really hard for me to decide what I like in general. So I find it a little bit weird that I didn't like absolutely love it, because I do like other character-based books as well.
Right.
So it's kind of weird.
I don't know your reading tastes very, very well, but I would have guessed that you are a theme or plot-based reader, and that's how I picked books to recommend to you, actually.
Yeah. We'll see. Maybe over the journey of this channel, people can tell me what my tastes are. So what else are you reading, Bart?
So I'm also reading, the book is called Final Eclipse. I don't remember the author. It's I think it's a self-published book. I'm on Readsy, right? So I decided to try that. You get to review books for them, and you get free books. And it feels like a YA story. It's got an interesting premise. I think the author is a scientist, and it shows. But it's got a weird dichotomy. It goes from being kind of heavy on the science to being super light and almost cringy on the dialogues. Like he has a lot of young people and he just cannot write young people at all. So you go from like, oh yeah, this is a cool idea about, I don't know if anybody's going to be reading this book necessarily, but aliens show up or something shows up that starts to grow and block out the sun, essentially. And it turns out that these aliens are trying to kill humanity, Earth, destroy Earth by unveiling this massive solar sail that they used to get to our solar system. But now they're using it at this L1 that is going to allow them to stay there permanently, but also to block out the sun and freeze everyone. So Earth, the crops are dying. So that's an interesting premise to use that, to kill everybody. Obviously, pandemonium on Earth as people are, freezing and all the crops have died very quickly. So it's very interesting. But then he goes from having this interesting premise, and I'm curious what's going to happen in this book. I'm only maybe 40% into it, to having dialogue that is very difficult to get through. I'm skimming because it just, I don't know, cringy, I think is the best word for it. Just doesn't feel like these are like teenagers and they talk like 9-year-olds. It's both good at times and then weak. But the one that I'm really mostly reading, I'm doing a buddy read right now, and it's The Canticle for Leibowitz, which is a book that I meant to read for a long time and always kind of like picked it up and then put it aside, picked it up and put it aside. And finally, I'm doing it with Chris from Liminal Spaces and Robin from Bookspin. We're reading it together, and we are going to talk about that book as well, I think on Robin's channel. And I'm really enjoying Canticle for Leibowitz. I find it to be well written. There's huge depth, very intriguing premise. The religious themes are interesting and explored in a very kind of nuanced way. I like.
How far into it are you?
I'm sorry?
How far into it are you?
Probably like 65% through it. So there's like 3 parts to this book, 3 main, because it's kind of a stitch-up novel, although it feels pretty seamless, unlike some of the stitch-up novels that I read in the past that did not work for me because of that jarring kind of a breakup. This one works well. So I'm in like almost done with, I think, the second part. And yeah, I think it's good. I think it's good. I'm hoping it'll stay that way once I'm done with it. So yeah, so I'm pretty busy with the 3 books. My little brain is like, trying to, get it all, kind of connected, memorized. I have a, hard time memorizing names, for example. So when there's like, and there's a lot of names in this one that I forgot already about. This was heavy on that. So yeah.
Have you read it, Whitney? Canticle?
I have. I just liked it.
Yeah.
Strongly. Very strongly.
What was it about it specifically that you did not like?
I was very upset that the character that you follow from the beginning disappears from the book after part 1.
Yeah.
I absolutely hated it. Like, I was like, why am I reading this? I don't care about any of these other people. I hated part 2 and part 3. Hated it.
That's what I've heard from many.
It's tough when you get attached to a character and they don't turn up later in the books. It's hard because he was obviously going for like this kind of generational kind of story, but it does hurt the book if you don't like the characters later. Yeah,
I like the characters later, and there is a reason why that person disappears from the book. Obviously, I think in order to tell this story, there has to be a time gap, so it didn't bother me, but I could understand how it would be difficult to continue with the book when you've liked someone, and then because it's pretty abrupt the way the character disappears from this book. Very like strange, just like, okay.
Well, that's what I disliked, is because I do like that. I'm very much a thematic ideas reader. We were talking about that, Sam. And so I felt like I liked the character, which was great, little bonus on top. And then all of a sudden he just disappears. And in many ways, because that story ends the way it does, and of course, no spoilers, but because it does end the way it does, I just really felt like I was like, so what was the point of that? And then there's still so much more of the book. And then I kept asking myself, so what is the point of this? and I never had an answer to that question, and then I wanted to burn the book at the end. So
I'll find the answer. I'll let you know, Whitney.
if you find the reason of like what is the point of that, I would love an answer. Like love.
I would have to reread it. It's been a while now, but for me, I enjoyed the book, but it didn't like blow my mind at the time, especially as I'm like quite a fan of post-apocalypse books.
Yeah.
But it's kind of one of those books where we all have these kind of books where the further you move away from it, the more you appreciate it. I think that's how I feel about it now.
I think, I'll be honest with you, I think the reason why, also one of the reasons, I think the book is good. But one of the reasons I'm liking it more than I would have is the expectations going into it. I think, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think we all have this. If you're really hyped for a book, if everybody's been telling you how amazing it's gonna be, and then you pick it up and it's just like, oh, it's good, yeah, but I'm like waiting for this thing to happen. The Sun Eater book 1, it was good, but I've heard so much about it. I thought it was going to be just like the most incredible thing, and to me, it was really good, like well written. I mean, right, you can write. It's good world building, whatever, but it seemed like kind of just okay, nothing new. But with this book, with Canticle, I expected not to like it. I was like, oh, this is just going to be a slog. I don't know why I had those thoughts in my mind. So
I think that's the best way to go into a book, because then
absolutely,
like, oh my gosh, this is so much better than I thought it was. It's amazing. I think that's awesome.
Well, this is exactly why I didn't really enjoy the first Law as much as I thought I would, because of the incredible hype around the series. I was thinking, this is going to, the way people talk about it, this is going to be one of the best things I've ever read. And at the end, I was just like, it was good. Not like, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever read. And it's happened with quite a few series over the time I've been watching YouTube, and, the hype trains build. It happened with The Expanse. Like, I liked it, but I was like, 7 out of 10, good, but not, my mind isn't blown. It happened with, oh my God, what's it called? Fonda Lee series, starts with Jade
City.
Jade City.
I also felt the same way about that. I think sometimes the hype around a certain book or series, at least in some of the things that I've noticed, is that a lot of those books have huge a point of easy access and accessibility, and also mass appeal.
Yeah.
And so for people who are like really entrenched into a specific genre, sometimes those aren't the best books, because we've all encountered many of those ideas, because what makes them good and popular is often not what makes them like mind-blowing for somebody who's been in the genre and seen some of those ideas. So
that's a really good point. Yeah, and that's maybe why I love someone like Iain M Banks so much as well, because he's not really doing exactly the same as everyone else. He's kind of moving outside a little bit of the norms of the genres. So I agree. But we've talked about fantasy a couple of times now. So I actually want to ask you a little bit about, so you're both, like I said, Whitney's channel is almost exclusively sci-fi, and Bart's is, you said you read 75%, and you kind of use your channel as like almost like a diary of how you read, right? I've heard you talk about it like that before.
That's true. Yep.
But I know, Whitney, that you read a lot of fantasy.
I do.
So I just want to get your just general opinions on, firstly, Whitney, let's start with you, Whitney. Why did you decide to focus mainly on sci-fi when you do read a lot of fantasy as well?
Because the fantasy space is filled. That's the number one. I didn't intend for it. That's why I named my channel the way I named it, because I didn't intend for it to be exclusively science fiction. But when I started the channel, I was reading legitimately 75% sci-fi. And I really wanted to deep dive into sci-fi, and that's where I was as a reader. And I have several like fantasy videos on my early channel that really just didn't do well. And then all of a sudden I got absorbed into the Sci-Fi Alliance, and had a bunch of other things happen at the beginning of my channel. and I just was I started out in fantasy, and I just started looking more forward to my science fiction books than I did my fantasy. I still pick those up. I still have escapism reading. I still like them, but I'm mostly sci-fi now, I guess. So that's kind of how it happened.
So your reading is also more sci-fi now as well?
It is more now, yes.
Yeah. And how about you, Bart? You mostly stick to sci-fi, right?
So yeah, right now, like I said, about 75% sci-fi, and then a mix of everything else. I would like to read more fantasy. I see the appeal to fantasy, but when I pick up fantasy books, a lot of them just seem to lack something for me. I think the storytelling, the world building itself is amazing. In books like Stormlight Archive, I read not too long ago. I read the first 2 books in the series. I haven't continued, even though I enjoyed them quite a bit. The characters, Kaladin, it's a lot of fun, a lot of fun. But I feel like with science fiction books, I get something different from them. I do get something more, and I love the kind of the breadth that science fiction also brings to the table, because we know that, Sam, you love dystopian novels, which is part of science fiction, kind of looking into the future, what the future may hold if certain event happens, whether it's environmental or alien, whatever it may be. And that way you're able to kind of extrapolate into the future what human condition would be like in those impossible to imagine situations. So a book like Cormac McCarthy's The Road is a science fiction book. And I just love that about sci-fi. Just the scope of it, from a story like the one I'm reading right now, which is kind of light, to Canticle for Leibowitz, which is really kind of heavy on the religious themes. And there's just so much in science fiction. When it comes to fantasy, the books that I've read, and it hasn't been a lot. So this is a me problem, not a fantasy. I realize that there is a lot there to be explored for sure. But the books that I've read seem to kind of offer a similar thing. It's another world that's been built, whether it's Stormlight Archive or Lord of the Rings, which I enjoyed. Hobbit is one of my favorite books of all time. I read it when I was young, and just the feel of that book has stayed with me forever. So I have a soft spot for the Hobbit. Incredible. I don't know. I haven't read enough. I'm enjoying The First Law so far. I read, for example, Philip Chase's The Way of Edan. But in those books, it seems like it's kind of, they're all a little bit different, but they're all kind of like, there's like a power struggle. Just something is missing for me, whereas with books like Iain M Banks's The Culture novels, the vision of that future is one that it just appeals to me to no end. Like, I can see myself living in the culture, the decadence, being able to have and just the imagination of putting myself in a situation where that is actually maybe not likely to happen, but it is possible, as opposed to a fantasy world, which is just totally make believe.
Is the difference between them, Bart? Do you think the difference is the simulation to the intellect, or is the difference that you would prefer a futuristic world rather than a magical?
I think it's both. I don't know if there is a book like Cormac McCarthy's The Road in the fantasy realm. I mean, if there is there a book like 1984? Is there a book like Canticle for Leibowitz? Is there a book like what's this? Oh my gosh, what's the book? Peter Watts. It's just like
Blindside.
A book that explores like those themes. I don't know, maybe those things exist in fantasy realm, but everything I've seen, it's just it's Game of Thrones, which is great, so much fun, but it just kind of seems like maybe something. So I think the intellectual side, I think science fiction, maybe from what I've read, and of course there's so much more that I have explored in the SF than I have in fantasy, but it seems like there's more to it. I mean, a book like Piranesi, for example, was a great book. I loved it. It was something different. That world really appealed to me because it wasn't, again, kind of like a medieval, but not really take on the story.
So I think what you're saying is that a lot of fantasy is kind of they hold a lot of similarities, and it's probably coming from the Tolkien school and a lot of imitation and influence coming from there.
Yeah, but if you just switch it, and if you just set it in a kind of a Japanese make-believe world with some magic, I don't know if that's the difference I'm looking for. It isn't. Like you talk about Jade City, that wouldn't be the difference that I'm searching for. I feel like if I'm going to read something in that vein, like Bernard Cornwell, like a proper historical setting for that theme just appeals to me a little bit more. But I want to read more fantasy. I want to find fantasy that I really fall in love with as much as I fell in love with so many science fiction books. So I'm searching for it.
I mean, they definitely exist, and I feel like the variation is really starting to improve and build in the past couple of decades. I think there was definitely not necessarily stagnation, but not too much variety of ideas. But I feel like it's coming out a lot more now. Like, for example, I read, where is it? City of Last Chances.
Tchaikovsky.
Right? That's a fantasy book, and I would say very different to any of the classic fantasy books. You could almost say it's Orwellian in nature as well. You mentioned like 1984. There's definitely a lot of similar vibes going on in here. The elements of control of a city. And it's really, 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 really different and really beautifully written. So it does exist, but it's maybe a little harder to find in general.
I would also add to that Perdido Street Station.
Oh yeah, you talked about it recently. Yeah.
Yep. I think that would be an incredibly fun video to make at some point, is fantasy books for sci-fi fans.
I was literally thinking of doing that.
I'm literally okay, I have some ideas.
I would watch it. I
was thinking of doing the reverse as well.
Yeah, I thought so too. That I just don't have as big of a list.
Yeah.
I would have to come up with reading more books to decide.
So one that comes to mind for me is A Fire Upon the Deep, for example. Have you read that, Bart?
Oh yeah, it's one of my favorite books of all time. Fire Upon science fiction books, like top 5, certainly.
That to me, in many ways, reads like a fantasy book.
Yeah. Well, especially the parts on the Tynes planet.
Exactly.
Yeah, that does read, and it's kind of a medieval setting, so he has definite. But the big scope of it is, there is this mind-blowing, this novum that we look for in that book that I did not. It's not derivative. It is original. It is pretty amazing idea, and yeah, I love that book. It's amazing the zones of thought, right, that are introduced in that book. The blight. I mean, there's so much in it. I liked it a lot. I know Whitney also read and enjoyed the follow-up to it, which is actually a prequel, Deepness in the Sky, recently, right?
I'm going to even revise my previous statement and say I really think they could be read in any order. They're really not linked.
Yeah.
I liked the ideas in Fire Upon the Deep more, and I do hope to read Children of the Sky, which is really the sequel. It's book allegedly number 3, but I hope to read Children of the Sky this year. But Deepness of the Sky could definitely be read as a standalone, and I kind of view it as such too.
Okay.
I thought it was more of a fun story, even though the ideas were better in Deepness of the Sky.
And I'll say, if I can jump in, I'm hearing myself. I started reading Children in the Sky, and I could not get through it. And Children in the Sky, it for a good chunk. And the problem with it was missing the parts that I loved about Fire Upon the Deep. I mean, we are just on this Tynes planet now, and it just feels kind of like I don't want to say it. People are going to hate me. Fantasy.
What?
It's just like, you got these kids who are growing up, like, what happens in Fire Upon the Deep if you've read it.
It sounds awful. My God.
No, I'm sure it's good, but it disappointed me, and I did not finish it. I didn't give it a proper chance. Maybe I read like 5-10% most.
Well,
So,
guys, at some point, if we're going to keep doing these buddy reads and like learning each other's styles and all this stuff, we need to assign each other a book. That would be so fun. I
that's a
think
good idea.
something to think about.
I just wanted to say something else about this like fantasy sci-fi thing. Sometimes when I'm reading a sci-fi book that is so wildly futuristic, it almost feels like a fantasy to me in a way.
I need some. I need some.
I'd love some, but I've decided no caffeine after 2 p.m. because I sleep so awfully, and it's
only 9:40 in Colorado. It's my first bucket of coffee. First of many.
But sometimes, like a little, almost in like the Algebraist. I know it's hard because they're traveling around a lot, but sometimes when the world seems so far away from what we know, it almost feels like a fantasy to me. It almost feels like I'm learning these different cultures, which could just as well be a country on a world. And the ideas are so far flung that it feels fantastical to me rather than fiction that is based on science.
I feel like that's probably true, except for a lot of the newer books, at least from my understanding. Most of the sci-fi books that are happening on a different planet that are exploring different culture don't have a hero's journey.
True.
True.
Yeah, and there's definitely not that in Algebraist. It's definitely not there. No. Which is really great about all the Iain M Banks books that I've read. I don't think it has that trope. I don't know. Player of games, maybe a little bit. I mean,
we can get onto that shortly. But also a sci-fi question I had for you. Like, sci-fi always gets like lambasted as this. Well, for the people that are, negative towards sci-fi, they call it just an ideas genre, which the people for sci-fi will say is why it's good. But a lot of people say the characters are lacking, right? So I want to hear some recommendations that you two have that might have, well thought out, well developed characters. Blank. Are you proving it true?
No, I think I don't know, Whitney, if you want to take this one, if you have something that pops off. But I mean, I would say, just looking at the books that are standing right next to me, Hyperion, in my opinion, Dan Simmons is an excellent author. I recently read The Terror, which was great. And this has everything, in my opinion. That's why I love it, because it has a propulsively readable story. It has a fantastic world, and it's got good characters. The characters, each one, I think, is unique. I mean, the poet, he's funny. He's just like, I mean, everyone sounds different. I think Hyperion, if some of your viewers have not tried it, maybe it's not the best book to start your science fiction journey with, if you're going if you're just brand new to the genre. But I think Hyperion, for example, has fabulous characters, especially in book one, very well developed. And I think there are others, even classics, maybe. A lot of the older, yes, mostly idea-driven stuff by Clarke or Asimov tends not to have much character development. But I think in Dune, we do see, obviously, development of characters throughout, and big major changes. And I think they do stand out. I'd have to think about some of the more recent books that I've read that maybe offer character development.
Fire from the Deep is one of them.
Yeah, great characters. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Are you talking about the Tynes or the humans?
I'm going to talk about all of them. Yeah. I would even say the AI character is very distinct in that book.
True.
All of them.
Iain M Banks with.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I bet you're trying to get us to say Iain Banks.
It's the obvious one. It's the obvious one. I mean, the ships are incredible characters. The mines are fabulous. I mean, Iain M Banks.
I know you didn't like it, but I think there's also a lot of the books that have the mainstream mass popularity lot of those books are going to be really good with characters.
Yeah.
So, for example, even though you didn't like it, The Expanse, incredible characters.
Yeah.
Also, Project Hail Mary,
Yes.
Yeah.
really great characters.
So I just want to put on the record that I did like The Expanse. I just wasn't, my mind wasn't blown like I was kind of promised by the hype. But I would agree that has like, it's very much character forward in a series. And I liked it. 7 out of 10 is a good score.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm sorry. There's so many books, I think, in sci-fi that are very character heavy. I actually paused the book that I was reading that was mostly a character heavy book to pick up Quantum Thief for a video that I'm trying to film. But I haven't finished Quantum Thief, so I'm not going to include it. But there's a book called Dying Inside by Robert Silverberg. That's all about a character. It's really not about a story. It's about a character. And it even has telekinetic powers, which is pseudo fantasy style. So there are books out there like that are all about characters, all about their character journey and what struggles they have, that kind of stuff. And then we also have more like adventure stories like The Expanse and Project Hail Mary. And there are so many books out there that are just, they've got good characters, but they also have good plot. Just like Hyperion.
Yeah.
So,
I just read Dying Inside. But
I would,
in December.
Oh, we should talk about it later.
I would say that has almost no plot. And
I would agree. Except for the fact that he's losing his power. That is the plot.
Yeah, but like the story takes like 5 days. And there's like a lot of like flashbacks which kind of thicken out the context of his like losing his ability, but like not much really happens. But I enjoyed it, and I thought the character was good. I agree.
And if I can jump in,
no.
So Dying Inside, you mentioned, which I think is absolutely true, and it's an interesting thing that can happen to science. I think when these books were written, because if you go back to the 50s, 60s, and maybe early 70s, telepathy was prevalent in many of these books, and it was looked at as a potential science that is being developed. I know FBI, was it CIA, who was studying, the Russians are looking into it. So this was taken seriously. Now, obviously, you mentioned it feels like fantasy. It's just kind of silly telepathy, but there were so many good authors like Silverberg, who, like Sturgeon, for example, with a fabulous book of, what's the name of the book? No, you didn't like Sturgeon?
Well, that's also on my list of books to burn.
Yeah, I could see why. What's the title? It's like we're talking
More
about.
Than Human.
Yeah, More Than Human. I thought it was really well written, but a tough read. And anyway, but those, it's interesting how that science has disappeared from serious thought.
Maybe in 30 years, the books that are like we're reading now and coming out now, people will look back at those and be like, you guys were so naive, so stupid.
Well, we're definitely going to be that way, because then they're going to be like, faster than like travel, not a thing. And everybody like sort of accepts that now,
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, even the way technology is moving so quickly right now, I do think that a lot of the books that are being written today some of those ideas may be outdated in 10 or 15 years, especially if you're writing a book based on the current knowledge of AI, for example. It is, I think, difficult to know where we're going with this technology that's changing. Like I'm using AI right now for my work almost daily for something. So we'll see if we're going in a good direction, a bad direction, or something that we just can't predict.
Well, speaking of AI,
shall
we talk about the big guy himself?
Yeah, let's get into it.
He should have been knighted Sir Iain Banks, Sir Iain M Banks, depending on what genre you are reading. So we've read 2 books together. The Algebraist was our most recent one, and we read Use of Weapons before. You can check Bart's channel for our chat on that. Tell me, both of you, about your experience of Iain M Banks so far and how you're finding him. Ladies first, Whitney.
I'm like really surprised. I wasn't sure because I hadn't read any of the culture novels. I kind of like heard like rumblings about the culture for a long time, but I just kind of ignored it because I for some reason I think it's like the covers or something. It was just like I thought I wasn't gonna understand it. I thought it was gonna be super hard science, and I just for some reason I thought it wasn't for me. I also watched a couple of those what is the culture videos and ended the videos more confused about what is the culture than I came in with. And so like I feel like somebody could just have said, this is a universe where you can read the books in almost any order. Have fun. And I would have been less scared about that than all the videos that anyone's ever made. So it was a really big pleasure, I think, for me to get into Iain Banks, start to recognize what his style of writing is, which is incredibly accessible, but still intellectually stimulating. He always has these like nice little like diamonds throughout the story of like incredible idea nuggets that you could chew on for ages and write just a whole story on. And then he's like, let me explain this to you for a minute. Okay, next. Yep. Okay, next. And I love that about these stories because he still focuses on the characters. I feel like he always has some kind of clever AI. He has some kind of clever reason for his title, which he will explain to you in the book, which I actually super appreciate. I don't think I told you guys that in our buddy read, but I love that. And then I don't know, like I'm trying to start trusting him as far as his endings go, although I end up with a lot of questions, as you guys know. So
yeah,
you can laugh and make fun of me. It's fine.
Yeah, you're not a fan of his endings, are you, really?
It's not that I'm not a fan. It's that I need more explanation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's it.
So
sometimes you have to give it a little bit of time, you know?
Yeah.
Let's not Star Wars this. No Darth Vader ending.
So how are you enjoying your Banks experience, Bart?
Oh, it's a revelation. I think it's exactly what I was looking for, Iain M Banks. And I had some trepidations going into my first read. Like Whitney said, it's all about expectations. And I wasn't sure if I was going to enjoy. My first Iain M Banks was considered Fleabag, and I enjoyed it. I loved it. I mean, it isn't my favorite of his books, but it was so much fun right from the beginning. I loved Consider Fleabag, and for me, it was a good start point. I have been reading them. I agree with Whitney 100%. If someone is listening and gets interested in Iain, you can certainly start them at any, in my opinion, in any place would have been fine. But I think Consider Fleabag was a good place for me. What I like about Banks is, I'm going to echo, of course, what Whitney said, because I agree with every single thing, except for the endings, because they worked for me. But I agree about everything else with Whitney. And it's a complete package. That's kind of how I look at it. I just get from Banks everything that I want in a book. They're well written. I mean, the guy was brilliant. And he is able to balance things very well between some heavier themes, some light exposition, which he does masterfully. It's no info dumps. It's woven throughout. I'm learning how he likes to start his chapters, for example, kind of throwing you into a new scenario, and you have to, as you're reading, figure out who is where, what's happening. But it's so well done, and the nuggets of brilliance that he's able to sprinkle in about, like for example, in this book about depression, when our main character is depressed after a certain event, so depressed, in fact, that he doesn't even have enough energy to kill himself. Because as Iain M Banks says, I have it in my notes somewhere, I don't know if I'll find it, but he basically says that in order to commit suicide, you have to have enough energy kind of to do it. You have to have enough drive. So there's so many things to think about. And then also he brings these heavier, almost nihilistic elements to some of his books, and then brings lightness, incredible humor. You know, British humor, it doesn't always work for me. like the hitchhiker. I don't know. Like, I'm supposed to laugh at this? No, it's just silly. It's stupid. I get that there's allegory and okay, fine. There's like deeper themes that you could extract, but it wasn't funny to me. I find this guy amazing. The complete package, from the mind-blowing to good characters to these varied worlds also that we get to explore, that he brings so vividly. And they're based on, incredible real scenarios. Like, what would it be like if you lived on a gas planet, into the depths of that planet, four-dimensional kind of world? Like, if you're meeting somebody, it's not just like, now you have to all incredible, or the planet that is all water, that ocean planet. Like, when I'm reading, and when I got that, like, when it hit me, I had chills almost. I had goosebumps. Bless you, Whitney. I had goosebumps. It's like you have this planet that isn't all ocean. It's water all the way to the core. There is no core to the planet. Like, when you think about that, it was just fascinating ideas and what kind of life would evolve on those planets. And he does it so effortlessly. And like Whitney said, it's a short part of, that could be a story in itself for so many other authors. But for him, it's just, it's another idea, because I got a whole bag full of these ideas to throw at you. Incredible.
That is the thing that I love about him the most, I think, is just the scope of his imagination. His imagination was absolutely boundless. Hello, doggy.
Yay.
Like, these culture books, we said they're all standalones. Basically, you can read them in any order. I wouldn't necessarily say that, but generally you can. But every single one of them is like just completely different. He really wanted to explore so many different parts of his world. And, he wrote, I don't know what to call it, contemporary fiction as well, normal fiction, anything. I've read 5 of those books, and all 5 of them were just completely different. They all have his style, his voice that you can feel coming through the pages. But I just love his imagination and how varied he is as a writer. I think he's a real hidden gem.
Mm-hmm.
I find it bizarre that he's not as well known as he should be. He's like one of these writers.
Well, you know what? Maybe give it 5 years. I think as more people are, because I am seeing his books now everywhere. I don't know if it's the fact that I'm reading them. That's why I'm seeing them everywhere. You know how that goes. You buy a new car and now you see it everywhere. Perhaps it's that neural pathway thing. But I do think he's being rediscovered the way Ursula K. Le Guin, for example, is so talked about and read. And I love her books also, but I feel like it's the same level, maybe in some ways more approachable than Ursula K. Le Guin's, more for the masses than The Dispossessed or Left Hand of Darkness. So I do think I wouldn't be surprised if Iain M Banks is not talked about in 5 or 10 years as a master of SF.
I agree, and I do think that one of the things that helps is that a lot of his books got this reprint.
Yeah.
Because I know the Algebraist was really difficult to get until the reprint. So I think that helps with the accessibility. And I know that a lot of people like Ursula Le Guin's prose, and I don't disagree. I think she has incredible ideas, but I always had a hard time connecting to her characters. And I don't have that problem with Banks. So I will say, I personally, even though I had some questions about the ending, I would definitely say this is a hidden gem. And I'm so surprised that more people aren't talking about it, because it has so many of the things that people are looking for. Up until that very last section, I was ready to put it on the list of, if you like Hyperion, you should maybe check this book out. I still might. I'm still thinking about it. It's not the same story, but it does have lots of layers. It's like you said, Bart, the whole package. It's the whole package.
Yeah. Well, I'm fighting the good fight. I'm hoping that I'm playing my part to making him bigger than he is, because he deserves it, in my opinion. It's my favorite sci-fi series ever. I think it's totally unique. I will just speak quickly to, I don't think you should start the series at Accession. Do not start there. We read this in the book club that I run here in Iceland, and most of the people are like, no, I didn't understand anything. So you kind of need a little bit of background knowledge for this one. And I would probably also say don't start with the 10th book, Hydrogen Sonata, again, because it does help to know a bit more about the culture.
Yeah, that's the last book, right?
Yeah.
What if I read Hydrogen Sonata? Would I get it?
Yes, I think so. There's like a few things that, like, the thing it explores is oh my god, what's it called? Called subliming. So where like a huge society will upload their consciousness to another level of being. It's like a really super high sci-fi concept, and it's kind of talked about a little bit in the previous books. So that's like nice little nuggets, but otherwise, I think you'll be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I would also say that one of the biggest things that people need to know about getting into Banks also is, for some reason or another, if you're a big audio book person, and I know you're just starting, Bart, but a lot of his books are not available.
Oh.
Some of them are, but not all of them.
I did not know that. So for Accession, which I just talked about, so I've got a lot of audiobook readers in my book club. One of the biggest things they struggled with, right? So a lot of this book is based around the AI. They're called AI minds for people who haven't read the culture. So like super powerful AIs that basically run society. And this book is mostly about them. So you get a lot of conversation between AIs, and I don't know if you can see this, but so basically, if you're reading a book, you learn to skip all of the nonsense little codey bits that are being computers and then just read the actual conversation. Whereas the audiobook reads out all of the little bits.
Yeah.
So everyone that audioed it was like, oh my God, it was so impossible to listen to. So another hint, read this with your eyes if you're going to read it. But let's move on to the Algebraist. So this was our second buddy read. I absolutely loved both of our buddy reads, and this was really fun. I'm going to ask you, Bart, your opinion on this book first, because you were quite excited about it. So I want to hear your views.
I was, and again, it's expectations. Now, prior to this, I read 3 books in the Culture series, and I don't know if we mentioned this.
No,
I don't know if we did.
Sorry.
This book is not part of the Culture. Culture is obviously this incredible future society that Iain M Banks has created, and most of his science fiction books, right, Sam, take place in the Culture. This is a standalone. This is a new world, a different look at a possible future. In this book, we get to explore a future that isn't maybe as utopian as in some ways the Culture might be. I think highly, I can't say the word hierarchy, ordered world, people stepping above others. It's a different type of read for sure. What I loved about this book was I didn't know what to expect, and very quickly I was blown away by Iain M Banks once again. And this book has become, like I already said, one of my favorite reads because of how exciting it was. So I really enjoyed it. I think the characters were incredible. The aliens in this book were fascinating. Lately, I've had the pleasure of reading few books that scratch that itch, and this one certainly did that. Just fabulous world building. Like I said, a whole package, and I loved it. It was a book that, I don't know, 800, 700 pages long, that I mean, I had such an easy time getting through. It was a quick read also. Just a fantastic story that, like I said earlier, brought, a whole package. I really enjoyed it. And I recommend it to just about anyone who enjoys reading science fiction and looks for this type of a future story, far into the future. And yeah, it was incredible. I loved it.
Would you still place it in your top 10? You were saying that this is probably a top 10 book for you. You would?
I would, based on the enjoyment of the read. I definitely would. Once I start thinking about Iain M Banks's books, I like them all. You know, it's funny because I enjoyed this one so much, but if I just try to think, is this a better book than Use of Weapons, for example? I don't know if it is. I think I enjoyed it more than Use of Weapons, for sure. And based on that, I would rank it higher than Use of Weapons, or consider Fleabag, or Player of Games, because I had so much fun reading this book. Yeah, so it's definitely in my top 10 right now. Those lists, obviously, you know, they change, but I think I know Iain M Banks is not going anywhere as far as my enjoyment of his writing, and I want to explore all his works. You know, I have so many authors recently that I've kind of started reading who have really become very quickly favorites for me. You know, Kazuo Ishiguro is another one that comes to mind. But yeah, Iain M Banks, amazing, and this is a top 10 read. So much fun. I loved it beginning to end. I thought it was excellent. And I think one thing that I'll say about this book, and also all the books that I've read from Iain Banks, he takes chances. So those chances then can be kind of picked at, and you know, maybe one or the other person will love them or hate those. But he does take chances. He doesn't play it safe, which I think is fantastic about him. You know, there is always something that like, ooh, oh shit, he what? You know, a big surprise, a challenge to your sensibilities, you know, and we had that in this book. We have a strong protagonist. We have a huge set of characters, but then we have a villain on the other end that is, you know, like you said, mustache twirling. I think, Sam, you mentioned that a little bit too much almost, but yeah, he takes chances. So I love Iain M Banks, and I definitely recommend this book to anyone who is a science fiction reader.
Yeah, the villain was kind of my only real complaint about it. Like, I started liking him, but he was a little bit lacking in subtlety for me by the end of the book. But you're right, this is a much easier book to read than the Use of Weapons, I think, and that's mainly down to the structural elements. This is much more linear.
Yes.
It's just in a straight line. It's pretty much like I want to say adventure story, but it's not really an adventure. It's a task that our main character has to go through. He's forced to find some information that is kind of key to the whole galaxy, which is fully inhabited. And he goes on this series of misadventures, really, where he is trying to find this information. And it's just, like you say, it's just a very exciting book. It's fun, but it's also got those moments of thematic work and depth to it, and the characters are brilliant, and it's no Iain M Banks book without humor. And I think the humor is mostly done through the aliens in this book.
Yeah.
So the aliens are in a gas giant. They live on all gas giants, which firstly is like, I don't think I've heard of any other aliens that live on gas giants. So that already is like, whoa, that's absolutely crazy. This is different. And like, the world building is fantastic because of that. You spend a lot of time in a gas giant planet, and these aliens are just absolutely brilliant. They're like, the society is completely different to anything you might imagine, and they're just hilarious because they just don't care about humans. Just like these stupid little humans. They'll be gone soon. Who cares what they do? So that's why I really love it.
Not only do they live, when you say on the planet, they live in the gas giant, in the depths. So, you know, imagining these cities somewhere, and where I thought that was fascinating. Also, flying through the gas giant inside, excellent, and dwellers were incredible. I agree.
So, Whitney, how did you find the Algebraist?
Well, I kind of explained it to you earlier. I mean, I go back and forth about whether. So first of all, let me just say, I agree with Bart. I think this is a much easier read than Use of Weapons. I think Use of Weapons lingers with me a little bit longer because I doubt myself and I wonder exactly what's going on in that book. Like, you know, you almost want to reread it as soon as you finish it because you're like, wait, what? Like, I think this book does that. I mean, I really had such a fun time. I really like that Banks not only sets up this quest and this world, but he takes the time to give us the motivations and backstories of his character, and he does it in a way that's not boring.
Yeah.
Like, you want to know his backstory, you want to know what's going on with him, and he does that in such a fun way. I really enjoyed that about this book. I honestly, like, 10 out of 10 would have made a, oh my God, I love this book so much video on my channel until the end. And it's not that it ended poorly, so there's that. I just think it ended too quickly. Like, it didn't give us, he spent so long building these characters and this quest and what was going on, that to spend 600 pages and being like, this is this awesome story, and then in 100 pages they're like, oh, and everything ends, and you're like, just give me a little bit more time for that. Like, come on now. Like,
so without spoilers, would you say you need a little more like falling action?
No, I need like 100 more pages to like build up to the emotional climaxes that were. Again,
Fair
it is
enough.
really hard without spoilers, so I do apologize.
Should we go into spoilers then?
I think so.
Yeah. Just before that, I just want to say, you were talking about the reversal of expectations, those kind of fun things. I highly recommend you read his first book he ever wrote. It's not a sci-fi book. It's called The Wasp Factory. Okay, that was the first book he ever put out. It's very short, so it's very easy to slip in, but you will have the same feeling, and it is bonkers. It's mad. I can't believe it's his first book. You need to read that.
I was scared. I have seen it in my bookstore, and I was scared to pick it up because it's listed in horror. Can you talk about that? Am I going to be afraid? Because I am a little baby when it comes to scary books.
I find that weird. Like, I mean, it's probably based on the fact that the main character is like a teenage. I'm not even sure they're teenage. Like, they're quite young, and they're basically on their way to being a psychopath, right? So there's like a little bit of harm towards animals in the story, which is part of the name of the story, the Wasp Factory. So there are like horrific elements, but it's not scary. It's not scary. It's all about a character focus of this child.
Well, one of the things that I didn't like about More Than Human and all these others is, if there's going to be some horrific things that I want to read about, like, there better be a real strong purpose for it at the end in the story, because otherwise I don't want to read about that. So would you still recommend it? Because if you do, I'll get it. But I want you to think about this.
So the ending recontextualizes the main character. Okay. But kind of the way this child is brought up, it kind of all does make sense that they act in this way because they have a very troubled upbringing. So I think already that most of the story already explains why they act that way, but then there is an additional piece of information at the end that recontextualizes a very specific point, and it's like a big flip.
Okay.
And it maybe it explains a bit more about the characters around the main character.
Okay.
But it's really short, so it's worth a read.
Okay.
But yes, okay. Full spoiler alert. We are going to talk full spoilers for the Algebraist now in 3, 2, 1. Hit us, Whitney.
Okay, I assume you want me to tell you the end and why I was so upset about it.
Yeah, let's address the dweller in the room.
Well done, sir. Well done. Okay. Okay, so I want to go ahead and get it straight that I actually was interested in all the plot lines that we have. We have lots of characters, and we have at least an associated plot line with every single character. So we have our main character who is Fasten, who is on this quest to find the information. Good news is we get a resolution with this plot where we find our answer, and it matters for the story. But then they give us this little epilogue of like what happens after. And as we were talking, Sam, who has been struggling with it. So in this society, AI is not allowed. It is super outlawed, which is exactly opposite of culture. So it was a big deal in this book if you found an AI that's sentient, because that's super illegal. Okay, so the fact is that at the very, very end, our character, who was afraid of sentient AI, and he even had pieces in there where he said, I'm afraid, I'm scared, and he was talking to the sentient AI, and he had thoughts on the page that were like, is this guy going to kill me? Oh my gosh, I'm so afraid. And he couldn't even concentrate on the like conversation, or at least to my memory, because he was talking about how scared he was. And then he turns around, and once he finds this answer, he's like, oh yeah, I know who all the ARs are, and I'm secretly on their side, and nobody did anything at all to convince me that this needed to happen. I just magically remember, and I'm secretly on everyone's side. Okay, sure. All right, then let's move on to the next plot. Like all of them like clean up. You know, our villain guy, he gets defeated in less than 2 paragraphs. I mean, a little bit too fast for me. Like, just saying. Like, okay, well, if you had pulled him out of the story, granted you wouldn't have the quest, but it's like it like takes his importance and everything that built up throughout the rest of the 600 pages, and it just like dumps it on the floor out, and you're like, done.
Can I address that? Because
Yes,
can I?
please.
So if I could just address that, because we're gonna like if forget when it comes to Luciferus, the villain, I felt that his hubris really created his downfall, and I didn't think it was in 2 paragraphs. I thought it was done pretty well. He has this meeting with the dwellers, and he kind of, messes it up and creates this situation in which he is defeated ultimately and has to run. And I thought it was well that I didn't need more. He threatens the dwellers basically with attacking them and then gets destroyed. I mean, he runs away, but I thought it was done pretty well. I'm not sure if I needed more in that scenario because I think a lot of this book really concentrates on the dwellers and really shows the dwellers as these beings who have been around for billions of years, who just kind of get life a little bit more than we do. And I found this to be fascinating, the exploration of, even though we're seeing this from human perspective, I think the dwellers are the main character in this story, and how they kind of come out of this whole scenario as these beings that have been around for so long. They seem to be like a wishy-washy, but they really have the secrets to universe in more ways than one, including these portals that allow them, when they need to travel in all of their centers of their gas giants. So I was okay with the Luciferus kind of losing because of his hubris, kind of getting the best of him.
Well, I also don't mind the ending of that, but as I explained to Sam, and I think it was on one of our messages, so I do apologize if for some reason this wasn't, but if you think about Star Wars and other evil characters who are destroyed by their hubris, okay, Darth Vader is one of those, and I don't think that is a bad plot line. As a matter of fact, I think it's incredibly nuanced and probably the most real conversion story of how somebody who is a good person becomes evil, or how that you appropriately defeat an evil person, defeat them through their hubris. I love this idea. But you can't be like you did in Star Wars, where you're like, oh, I have a love for Padme that I'm not supposed to have, and because I love her so much, I'm afraid, so I have one bad dream, and now I'm going to go kill small children. That's what happened in Star Wars, literally the next scene. Bad dream, small children.
Yeah, but Luciferus is bad all the time. He's bad because of the...
You're right, Luciferus is bad all the time, and then he's like, he had one conversation with a dweller, and he's like, you do what I say, and they're like, no, bye. That was it.
Yeah, for me, so for me, that was like kind of anticlimactic, but I didn't really mind. Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I think the point is that this guy is so unbelievably cocky and he's always got what he wanted. Always, his power always shone through and got him to the top that he just expected to win. And so he didn't do his homework. Basically, he didn't realize that these people were a threat, and so his own stupidity meant that he had absolutely no chance whatsoever. Right?
And also, I think everyone, no one takes the Dwellers seriously to their own detriment, and we've learned that in the middle of the book. Also, I think that's kind of the point of the Dwellers. They just go keep it on the lowdown, their powers, and then when they need to, if you threaten them, they do kind of step up.
And they don't even care. Like they're just like, they didn't try to kill him. They didn't try to get their revenge because they're like, whatever, we don't care. This is what humans do all the time. So basically, if you don't leave, then you will get killed.
Both of his big ships, so you can't say they didn't try to kill him because they kind of did. But they at least took away his power, which is legit, okay? And normally, if in this big story, this is the only big thing that happened that was that fast, I would have been like, yeah, I would have preferred more, but okay, moving on, it's fine. But they did that with all of the plot lines in this story. It wasn't just Luciferus. It was also Fasten. It was also all of the AIs. Yeah, they literally like
not with Fasten, no.
All of the plots are like, oh, we will fix this in 5 pages.
When it comes to
600, but we're gonna fix it in 5.
Whitney, when it comes to AI, for example, and Fasten being afraid, he was afraid in the moment when he realized that the true twin, who he thought was a dweller, 2 minds within one body of a dweller, turns out to be an AI and helps him, but destroys like this easily. This whole, I forget the names of these troops that come on with ease. So now he just saw this true twin reveal itself as an AI and destroy this, I don't know, 30 people easily, right? By using this. So that's why he's afraid. He's not afraid of. I don't think there's ever mentioned that he's anti-AI.
All of that makes sense, but this incredible AI who's way smarter than most people, and he's incredible, he wipes his mind, but Fasten, because he's special, magically remembers somehow and magically gets over his fear. Like, I mean, it's just too much too quickly.
I don't think he had. I don't think there was a fear of AI necessarily that was really strongly presented in any moment other than when this true twin kind of destroys these whatever the troops were. I didn't see it earlier, and then I don't know. I didn't. I
know it was an AI.
I'm sorry.
I said there was no other moments of fear because he didn't know it was an AI. And then when he finds out it's an AI, he immediately gets to see the power of the AI, and then he's afraid. All of that makes sense. But you can't immediately go, okay, so now that this AI is gone, I'm leaving the ship. I have the answer. Oh, wait. I'm just going to go home because now I'm on the AI's side and I remember everything, even though the superpower totally erased my mind. And I just happen to remember because I'm better than that. Okay, sure. Okay.
So how I read the AI stuff, right?
Yeah.
To do with fear, I mean, we are shown in the story that he is an AI sympathizer, right? That is something that we are shown. Mm-hmm. So he's always like fighting the fight secretly for the AIs. But this whole society is very anti-AI and puts the fear of God in everybody of AIs. So I would say that at any point he is liable to fear of AIs because it'll be internalized, right? It's just an internalized fear that even though his mind wants to tell him that AIs are good, there'll still be this cultural underlying to it.
But how do you get over that quick? You have to have some kind of moment of impetus that changes you. And if you can't remember the moment that changes you, or if you somehow magically remember, even though this big, massive AI who's better than everyone erased your mind, like it's absolutely too much.
Maybe he would be more fearful of this AI if he had remembered what they can do on the ship, right? If he realized
or maybe we just all get over it. It's like, oh yeah, dogs attack me, but oh, this dog is nice. I'll just pet it now. I'm over it.
But he didn't remember being attacked. He didn't remember the attack.
Right, but then he suddenly remembered the answer.
But the AI did not attack him. They were super cool. I love the Truth and Whitney. They were incredible, and they were friendly to him, and they saved his life. They didn't attack him.
But he didn't remember that. He didn't remember that.
Yeah, okay. No, I know he didn't. I know he didn't. I know he didn't. But Whitney, but you're saying that the dog attacked him as if AI attacked him and then wiped him. There was no attack. So there's maybe this residual feeling of something, when something happens and then you don't. For example, I'll give you a quick story. Years ago, I was a kid. I had a horrible concussion, and I did not remember anything that happened before. It was in a sports school. I just started in this school. After the concussion, I went to that school for about a week. So this was right in the beginning of a new experience for me. I remembered nothing after the concussion, but I still had like this residual feeling of something happening. Like there's this murky thing that maybe remains. So I think maybe that's what he was exploring. And also the only time I think that we see Fasten presented with an AI is when he's at the very end talking to a gardener who he lived with for a long time, who turns out to be, and now he realizes that this gardener is an AI because of something, that changed in him in those experiences. And I think the nuance that Iain M Banks shows is powerful. It is, if you're, you can definitely nitpick at it. And I know what where you're coming from, and I totally get it. But I do think there is a way of flipping that and looking at it as an incredibly astute way of thinking about human emotions and mind and memory.
I do think of those things, but I'm saying that if you have a phobia of anything that's been trained your whole life,
he didn't.
He did. The entire culture is afraid of AI.
No, there was a war, and
when he discovers his first AI, which is the twin brain thing, but whatever phobia you have to have some kind of moment that will transform you. Okay, so whatever you're afraid of, I don't care if it's spiders, it's dogs, it's dwellers, it's AI, whatever you have to have some kind of transition moment. And you don't do therapy and you're just like, oh, look, this switch turned and I magically am over this. It takes a little bit of time.
Yeah.
And I just needed a little bit more time. We needed more pages and more explanation for him to rationalize and get his mind around this whole idea of, you know what? I do want to be on the AI side. I don't find it to be a bad ending. I thought it was a great ending. I just needed more emotional time to breathe, to be like, you can't just flip a switch and magically turn this on and off.
The way I read it, Whitney, was, I'm sorry, go ahead, Sam.
So I'm just thinking, so you basically want this transition between when everything's revealed about the portals and him going to his gardener, for like a little transition for him to like maybe meet an AI or two and realize that they are benevolent and nice.
I think I have the answer. Maybe I have the answer. So for one thing, I do not remember any part during the read where he was afraid of AI. He wasn't faced with any AI. I know the society doesn't have AI because there was this big war years ago, the robot war. And after that, the AIs are outlawed. But in this story, he does get the AI side explained to him, that this was, I don't remember exactly, but this was basically AIs were used, that AIs were not bad, that this war that was for political reasons, and perhaps that part wasn't erased. I don't know, but I just didn't find in the book any part other than when the true twin kind of goes crazy, reveals itself as this all-powerful AI, that he was afraid of necessarily of them. So, it didn't bother me because I didn't think he was afraid of AI on this deep level. I didn't get that anywhere. Like, I'm more like with Sam saying that he was more of a sympathizer, if anything. So.
Well, I would have said if you added in a scene there or a conversation where when the twin brain drops him off and we're done with our plot, okay, and he's like, okay, go back to your planet or whatever. If they had like a conversation, a one-page conversation, and he can't because he's allegedly been mind wiped at this point. But let's pretend like we take out the mind wipe at this point, and the AI says, you know, I should be mind wiping you, but instead I'm going to trust you. And the guy's like really touched by that, and he's like, okay, I know deep down I'm not going to turn him in. And then he has this moment where he was like, he sees something in the true twin where he's like, I totally relate to this guy, and I really trust him because we've been doing this whole adventure halfway together. And then he says, this reminds me of a gardener. And then ... And then he goes on, he solves the plot, and then he goes back home to talk to his gardener. Magic fix.
I don't know. I like Iain M Banks's way.
I'm just saying.
It's very obvious, you know. Like
change his mind. He needed something to change his mind. I felt like every single resolution in the book it just happened too fast.
I just didn't think there was any mind that needed to be changed. He wasn't against AI, and I didn't see him being like scared of AI. There was nothing about it up to that moment, which I thought was fascinating when the True Twin revealed itself as an AI. That was like a big deal because it wasn't like we saw interactions with AIs prior to that with many. There was nothing. There was some talk about what happened in the past, but I don't know. This book has so much stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna mediate maybe, or just say, like, for me, I can definitely see how that is a problem, how it could be addressed better. I can see that, like you say, just a page or two of some kind of interaction to explain it. But for me, it doesn't bother me because it's not the main part. It's not the main point of the story. It's not like I felt like the AI parts were like world building in a way, not the plot, not the main story. They were kind of used as informational background of how the galaxy works, and also as part of, not even the main reason, but part of the reasons that the what are they called, the Outworlders are fighting against the main government of the galaxy. So for me, it wasn't really about AI, which is why it didn't bother me as much.
Well, the main plot then, would you say that was his quest to go find information?
Yeah.
Okay, how did that resolve?
It resolved with him finding the information.
Be more specific. We're in spoiler section.
So he found the code for the, oh my god, I don't know how to say it. He found the code to that explains the other thing that tells you where
he called it an algebraic equation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he says, this algebraic equation that I had in this picture that I've had the whole time, turns out I solved it, and it's zero.
Yep.
And that means that there is no change. The answer to all of the dwellers' wormholes, or the dwellers' list, is that there is zero extra indications that have to be done, which means that the portals are all inside the planets the whole time. Yes. So this giant adventure that we just went on to solve the problem of the algebraic equation that is zero has been in my pocket this entire 600-page adventure. So that means that you went on this giant adventure, and it was a fun, galactic, world-spanning, amazing adventure that I could have solved in 3 pages at the end of the book.
Well, I think that's ironic. I think it is
ironic.
Yeah,
but it is awful fast.
No, I think it's exactly the point. Is that it's like purely ironic. It's purely dweller logic. It's purely dweller thinking. Like this is what they do. What the dwellers do. They're deceitful and they hold secrets. And it kind of didn't really matter.
Like you said at the beginning, it adds that nihilism that is not just a small part of this. It's a huge part, because it makes this whole adventure that he went on meaningless.
I don't think so. I don't think he solves it without it. I think the understanding of what that equation means, that the fact that you solve it for zero doesn't mean that you understand where the portals are hidden. And I think the reveal when he talks and then it turns out that it's not really him there, it's like a projection of him. I thought that was incredible. I thought it was fantastic. And I love that reveal, his realization that zero, the solving for zero means that all these dwellers who live in these gas giants actually have the ability to travel anywhere in the galaxy. And obviously in this story, the humans in this planet, their gate was destroyed some 300 years ago or whatever it was. They're awaiting a new gate arrival. So they're kind of cut off from the galaxy, which if you're connected to the galaxy, for then that was a huge also psychological blow to the humans. And meanwhile, these dwellers, who they're kind of like, oh, they're just like these silly beings, that kind of coexist with us. They had this power throughout this whole story, right inside those gas giants. So I thought it was amazingly well done for a reveal.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the dweller mindset of this, like, the inside joke, and also almost like reverse psychology in a way. Like, we know that you're looking for this thing, but the answer is not what you expected, and we're not going to tell you because we don't want to tell you anyway. So we're going to let you go on this big adventure, because why would we tell you? We're going to let you try and work it out for yourself, which would be unlikely.
Yeah. I don't know. I thought it was a satisfying, very, very satisfying reveal. I mean, I was just like, oh my God, that kind of a thing that, these dwellers were hiding in plain sight, this huge power that humans have been fighting for. And, I thought it was fascinating, and also speaks to me, to the interesting part of this book, which is the exploration of the dwellers' psyche. Which I thought was interesting. They're so different from humans in the way they think, react, and also live, because they live at a different time frame. They live slower. I don't know. There's so many interesting things that we got to explore. So even if you don't love that ending, Whitney, perhaps that journey isn't meaningless, because we learned so much and have so much fun along the way. And I think you've had that because you like the book also, right? So even if you don't, because I mean, everyone who reads any book will have a different reaction to it. And it isn't that I'm right or you're wrong, even if we can argue about it a little bit, some of these points. I think in the end, it's very a personal thing, but the journey was great, even if maybe the destination led you down a bit. Would you agree with that? Okay.
So what you're saying is it's about the friends we made along the way.
I guess. I mean, I do get what you're saying, where you're reflecting what the dwellers and their mindset are, and that it's like ironic the whole way. But in many ways, I guess that makes it very like a little bit of a fantasy style, because we just have this character, he goes on this journey. Humans and AI have been working on this problem for a long time. Nobody's been able to figure it out. And here's this character who magically figures it out.
I don't think so. I think they just kind of revealed it. This was a thing that came up, this list. It wasn't like AI was working on it.
No, I don't know if AI, I'm sorry, I must have misspoke. I don't know if AI was working on it.
This just came up, and he was
working on it.
Our protagonist also, I mean, no one who's listening to this now is thinking about reading the book and hasn't read it yet. But Fasten, our main character, is someone who is kind of attached to the dwellers. He's the seer, right? So he gets trusted with this when the information comes out to kind of figure this out. But it wasn't like everybody was working on it. I think this just happens on the page. Well,
but nobody needed the zero. I mean, let's be honest. Like, everybody had the dwellers list, and they looked at those numbers over and over and over and over, and so they knew that lots of people had the dwellers list. Okay, so all that Fasten had was a zero. It had an equation that equaled zero. So everybody had the dwellers list. But then they decided for a long time that the dwellers list didn't make
I don't know
sense.
if everybody had the dwellers list. I'm not sure.
So he was looking for the transform for it. So the thing that like translates it into something that we could understand, so we could look at the equation basically.
But I think also it's then the understand. He's a seer. He's been living with the dwellers, not only his projection, but also he physically with them. He understands them, I think, better than any, and that's why he's able to realize that they actually have this power at the center of their gas giants. That's where those wormholes, gates, are, that allow for that instant travel throughout the galaxy. And that's also part of what gives them the power. So I think his journey was necessary. His life work as a seer was necessary to not just have the list and the transcript, but also to then understand what the zero means in the big scope. So I don't know. I love this. There's so much, and we could obviously talk about. I personally feel that there were other threads in this book that were resolved not as well as the ones that you mentioned, Whitney. You know, I mean, there's. I forget the names. I'd have to like look up the names. Tynes, was it, who kills Sal? You know, like, and herself. I was just like, that was very abrupt, I thought. And I wasn't. I mean, I could get it. She was really there. There were hints of her, mindset of her. I don't know if it's depression. That would be the best, of PTSD or whatever it was, and what Sal did early on in the book. And that really was something that she needed to. But I was surprised that at how that was resolved. Very abrupt and unexpected. But I was okay with it. But I thought you would bring that up.
Well, I was getting there because we were talking about all the different ones. But I'm just saying every single resolution and that last 100, and I think it was like 120 pages or whatever, part 6. It was every single thread, I think, was a little too abrupt. It made me feel like he got rushed to finish it. Like he had the ideas, he had the perfect endings, but he wasn't given the time or the page space to end it the way he wanted to.
Do you know what I think it is?
God.
I think that may have happened, but like this happened to us in use of weapons as well. I think he likes to do this. I think he likes to kind of make you question it. And maybe that's something that might hinder a lot of people's appreciation for him, but I get the feeling he didn't really care. Just like, this is how I want to do it. I want to leave some things open to having questions and having people maybe not enjoyment.
He's not Andy Weir. You know, you're not going to get that kind of a, I think with him. And I think that's awesome, because then we can, discuss it with the Martian or Project Hail Mary. There's, it's all neatly wrapped up. You get a nice ending and you move on. With this one, there's some uncertainty, and I could definitely see your point.
It's not just the ambiguity; it's how fast it happens. It's like, okay, these characters, we're done with them, so they're going to kill each other. They're not even going to have like a conversation. And what's great is she at least addresses the fact that she's like, I'm not even going to bring it up to him. I'm just going to kill him with myself. Done. Okay, those characters are gone. Now we can. Oh, Zero? Oh, okay. He secretly figured out the secret that everyone's been working on forever. Oh, okay, that's fine. All right. Oh, and the bad guy? Oh, well, the Dwellers, they just magically, shoot his ships down because they said wrong things. Done. Okay, everyone's done. Bye.
I do not agree at all. I mean, you sound like you hate this book, Whitney.
I'm trying to explain that everybody needs some kind of emotional moment or time or chapters or like a conversation and incidents to get over whatever their resolution problem was, to create a climax that everybody feels okay with. And it doesn't have to tie up all the loose ends. I don't need that. I loved books that don't do that, but you have to have an emotional breath within the writing, or you have to have a transition point for changes. And he just didn't have any of that.
Well,
you just read it differently.
Yes, I'm going to say we should probably wrap up soon.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we should, because this is my guy, right? Maybe we should end on a positive note.
Of course,
yes, please.
It's not all. I'm sorry, it's not all negative.
No,
I really did like this book. I really did.
Honestly, I would rather it be this way. Like when we do our book club, if everyone's just like, that was good, I liked everything, then there's nothing to talk about. So
exactly.
I prefer it when there are differences of opinion. So it's not a problem. But because he is my guy, please say something nice about him before we leave. I know you have. I know you have. I'm just want a nice happy ending.
Also, let me ask you an easy question for you guys that has nothing to do with the ending. Okay. this was all of your first times reading this one, and some of us, we've all read a couple of the culture novels at this point. If you had somebody who was going to come in and they're like, I'm really intimidated about the culture, would you tell them that they could read this book first as their first introduction to Banks? Do you think that you would recommend it? Because I am on the fence. I'm honestly going to say that other than the ending, I would honestly say yes. I would say this would be a great first introduction to Banks because I had such a fun time with it. But I had some problems with the ending, so I just wanted to hear about your thoughts.
Well, I mean, if I can, I had no problems with the ending. So I would definitely recommend it. It's a fun ride. I wouldn't recommend it to someone who's not familiar with a lot of these concepts. If someone has not read a ton of SF, there may be just too much happening. Because one thing I do agree 100% with you, Whitney, that you said, I think in our conversations when we were reading it, when we finished the book, that you didn't bring up here. I think some of these threads, I don't have a problem with the way they were wrapped up, but they were maybe not 100% necessary almost. They could have been removed from the book, and the book maybe would have been even better for it. So that's something that I do agree with. But yeah, I would recommend this book to anyone who has read, books like Hyperion, these Fire Up on the Deep and enjoyed them. I think they will love this. And maybe they will hate the ending. Maybe they will love the ending. That's, up to them to decide, but I would recommend to pick it up.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say that I would not recommend it to somebody who is a newbie at sci-fi for sure, but somebody who is a sci-fi reader and is looking to get into Iain M Banks, I would definitely consider recommending this because I think it gives a really good overview of his style. You can really feel his style, his writing style, what he likes to do, the kind of world building he likes. So I would definitely consider it a good entry point for Banks for sure. Good question.
Yeah.
Good question. So I think that'll probably do, unless you guys have anything else.
I think I'm good. I mean, I would just say it's a great book. And maybe one thing that I wish happened was that Iain M Banks got a chance to live and write a little bit more, because I do think this book seems like one that I think maybe if there were other books that we could read in this world, they would be incredible. And then he would have his culture, pantheon of books which kind of look at the future from one perspective, and these books I think would show a different way of a possible moving forward. And it would be so much fun to read, and maybe some of these things would be explained a little bit better in the future books, also the reasons why. And I'd love to revisit the Dwellers and some of the other incredible aliens, because there were so many of them in this book. Just fabulous. I mean, there was like an alien who was a light year across, right? I was like what the? I mean, what? There's so much here. I forget the name of that alien, but it was just incredible. The Clouder, the Cloud of. Oh.
Yeah, I think its name was Jeff.
Jeff the Clouder.
Yeah.
I agree, Bart. Man, I wish that there were so many more books. There's so many cool ideas in here that he did not explain. So.
Yeah, I agree. He wrote 28 books, and it wasn't enough. So that's how I feel about it and about him. I would recommend people to read his other books as well, his non-sci-fi books. At least the 5 I've read, 4 have been really good. So,
what's your favorite, Sam?
What
can pick?
You mean of the non-sci-fi?
No, I mean all.
That's not possible to
I know that's so mean, but I don't care.
Ooh.
You know what, Sam? I think this is, as you're thinking about it, I'll say I think this is the problem with Iain M Banks, because I think a lot of authors who are hugely popular have one book that kind of draws you into his writing. Whereas maybe here, there's so many good ones, but there isn't one that is universally agreed to be, and maybe that's why he is under the radar for a lot of readers.
I agree. Honestly, I would probably have to say the use of weapons, which may disappoint you, Whitney, because you're not, the ending again wasn't very satisfying for you, but just the experience of reading it the first time was so mind-boggling, and I really enjoyed it the second as well. And just the structure of it, the way he plays with the story was just, even if you don't like the ending, you've got to appreciate how fucking awesome it was.
It was fucking awesome.
Yeah, so that's how I feel. I would say probably Wasp Factory is his most famous book.
Yeah.
So do check that out. So
I'd like to read all of them at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I still have like 9 of his non-sci-fi books to read, but TBRs, man.
Yep.
TBRs.
So, at least we did this one in. At least we got this one in.
Absolutely.
And I do have to say, I loved the name, like the fact that he wove that in there. The poem that lists the dweller list that this whole quest is about is called the Algebraist, and the ending, the way to solve this was an algebraic equation. Clever. I get it.
He was a smart man. But that's it. I think we should say goodbye. I have to go and meet a friend now and have some lovely dinner.
Have fun.
But thank you both so much for being on my first ever episode of Wisecracks. I think we definitely had some wisecracks in there. And you are wonderful guests and wonderful friends. And I've really enjoyed our buddy reads, and I can't wait for the next one. We haven't decided what it is yet or when, but it has to happen because it's really fun.
It will happen. Yep.
All right. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.